What's up everybody, welcome back. So back in the multiplayer project, and we have to finish our password and friends only lobbies. So in the last episode we made sure that players that enter the lobby are checked for the password and friends only stuff, but if we are already playing a game and somebody is joining, they skip the lobby, so then they will also bypass our password and friends only checks. So we're going to make sure that that is also working when a player is joining the game, and then we can move on to the next subject. So let's dive into the video. I want to mention that if you want to get the project files for yourself, you can become a member of the channel or become a Patreon, and you will get access to the Discord channel with the downloads in there. So let's start today's video. So first of all, one small thing I noticed while I was doing some testing. You can actually get stuck inside the weapon wheel. So let's take care of that one first. We want to go to the widgets folder and open up the widget blueprint weapon wheel. And in the event graph over here, so let's go to the start of our event construct. And so the issue is that we're only setting our character the first time we're constructing the menu. And if we died and we respawn, we get a new character. So then the reference over here is not valid anymore and it's not working. So what we could do to fix it, because we don't really need to do this every time we open the weapon wheel, so we only want to do it if the character is not valid anymore. So we're simply going to get a getter for our player character in here and convert this to a validated get. Hook it up. So if it's still valid, we can simply continue, and otherwise we're gonna copy the cast over here and paste it. So if we hook it up to the not valid pin, then it will make sure we have a new reference to our character in place. So that should fix the weapon wheel, and now we can start working on the private and the password lobbies. So for our sessions, the problem kind of is that we have two game modes and two player controllers. So in the lobby we're using the menu controller and game mode, and in game we're using the shooter player controller and game mode. And we kind of need both of them to have the same functionality to check if we are friends or if we know the correct password. So what we could do is simply add the code to both of those, but we kind of have an issue because if we change code in one of them, then we have to make sure that we also update the second one. So you're really prone to making mistakes and forgetting stuff if you do things like that. And the proper way to kind of fix this would be to make a new parent class and have that parent class contain all the functionality for both of the game modes, and then keep the separate child classes and work with those in the lobby and in game. So that's what we're gonna set up in this video. So we want to create a new game mode class. So let's go to our framework folder. I'm gonna right click over here somewhere, and I want to create a new game mode. So that can be a game mode base. And I'm gonna call this my blueprint SessionGamemode. Alright. And let's do a little bit of setup in here first. So we're gonna open this new session game mode, and we also want to open up our menu game mode. The first thing we're gonna do inside of our session game mode, let me grab my notes in here quickly. We're gonna set up an event in the event graph, and that's just going to be an empty event that we want to implement later in both of our player controllers. So we're going to right click and create a custom event, and that's going to be StartGameForController. Close. And for now we're not going to give this an input because we're going to create a new player controller as well. So just make sure we have the event in here, and now we want to go to our menu game mode, and in here we're gonna get the get lobby options function, and we're gonna copy this one. So right click and select copy, then we're gonna go to our session game mode and we're gonna paste it in here. So right click and paste function. So we can keep the well, let's change it to get session options. That's a bit more appropriate. And in here, there's actually one thing I forgot the last episode, and that's connecting this pin over here. So for the first property pool, friends only, if we didn't found it or it's the wrong type, we kind of want to continue over here to the next one. So make sure you hook this one up. And we want to create these variables. So let's right click and create the variable. So I'm going to rename them because they're not only for the lobby anymore. So I'm going to call them session friends only. And then go to the right a little bit. We have to use password. So create a variable. And let's rename this one as well. So this one is hooked up correctly. If we're not using the password, we're going to bypass the actual password string. And in here, we want to create the variable as well. And let's change it. So that is matching up again. So with this function in place, we can go to the event graph. And for event begin play, we want to call this. So let's just drag it in and hook it up. And that's the first setup in here done. So let's compile and save this one. And for now, we're going to move it out of the way. And we're going to go to our menu PlayerController over here. So we want to do a little bit of setup to make sure that we can easily replace everything later. So in here, we have two small references to our game mode. So that's over here in the verify password event. We're casting to the Menu-GameMode, getting the lobby password, and then call the StartGameForController. That's actually the one that we created in the previous episode. So in here we want to replace this. So let's get rid of the cast over here, and we're going to cast to our SessionGamemode. And then we can hook up the execution pins. And on the SessionGamemode, we have the session password. So we're going to get it from there. So session password. And replace it over here. And we also want to call our other StartGameForController event on the SessionGamemode. So drag from the SessionGamemode and call it from there. StartGameForController. So we don't have the player controller input yet. We're going to get back to that later. So for now, we're just going to replace this stuff and delete the old stuff. So that's good to go. And now we can go to the Menu-GameMode. And let me switch my notes quickly. So in here, we also want to get rid of the references to our old stuff. So for now, we're going to go to the end of our event handle starting new player event. That's over here. And we're going to delete our StartGameForController. So just get rid of this one. We want to get rid of the variable in here, lobby friends only, lobby use password, delete those. So those are the variables that are actually on this blueprint right now. So we have another call to our StartGameForController, so we're also going to delete that one. And then there's one more. So we also want to go to our StartGameForController event over here and also delete this one. So that's good to go. Now in here, no, there's actually one more. Over here, get lobby options. So in event begin play, at the end we're calling get lobby options. So we can also get rid of the function over here. So let's just delete the entire function and then also delete the call over here. So now that we got rid of all of the stuff in the event graph, we can clean this up. So we can also get rid of the lobby friends only variable, lobby use password and lobby password. And now that we have all of the old stuff out of the way, we're going to reparent this to our new class. So let's make sure that we compile and save. And let's just make sure that we have everything saved as well. So we're going to go to the class settings of the Menu-GameMode, and over here for the parent class, we're going to select our new SessionGamemode. So now it's reparented. You can see at the top right over here the parent class. And now we can hook everything back up. So if we go back to our event handle starting new player, over here we can simply replace what we removed. So we can get our boolean over here, and the first one was the friends only one. So we can just right click and get friends only. And although it's not in the list over here, because it's a part of our parent blueprint, we can simply get it. And if you would like to see him in the list, you can go to the little settings over here and then show inherited variables. And then you can also see them in the list down here. So we have the bool for the session friends only. Then over here, we want to get our use password bool. So also just get that one and hook it back up. So if this was false, we needed to call our StartGameForController. So we're going to drag off here and call StartGameForController. Like so. And we also needed to call this over here all the way at the top. If we are actually the first controller entering the lobby, then we are the host. So then we're just going to call our StartGameForController as well. Okay, so those are back in place. Now over here, where we deleted our initial StartGameForController event, we're going to right click and we want to actually implement the event from our parent blueprint. So we're simply going to look for StartGameForController. And this time we don't want to call the function, but we want to add the event. So we're going to select this one, and this will implement the parent event in this blueprint and override it. So later we need to add the input over here, but we're going to get back to that in a little bit. Now there's only one thing left to do, and that's in begin play. So currently we have a begin play event in our child blueprint, and this will replace the begin play event in our parent blueprint. So now our get session options function will not fire anymore if we run our Menu-GameMode. So we can simply right click over here and then add a call to our parent function. And this will make sure that we first execute our begin play on the SessionGamemode, and then we can add our own functionality in here. Okay, so if we compile it, we get a few errors because we need to have a connection hooked up, but we're gonna replace that in a little bit anyway. So for now, we're gonna ignore this. And we're gonna move on to our Shooter-GameMode and fix some stuff in there. So let's open our Shooter-GameMode. And there's not really that much we need to do in here. First of all, we want to reparent this to our new class. So we're going to go to the class settings, and again, we're going to select a new parent class over here, and that's going to be our SessionGamemode. And now we want to go to the event graph. And again, we want to make sure that we add a call to our parent function for begin play. So it will execute begin play as well. So let's just look for begin play over here. And we're gonna right click on event begin play and add a call to the parent function and hook that one up first. So that will make everything work. So that's the game mode done, and we have that one set up. So we're gonna get back to the errors in here in a little bit. Now we want to do kind of the same thing for the player controller. So we're going to create a new player controller class as well, and we're going to reparent both of our existing player controllers to that new parent class. So let's right click, make a blueprint class, and that's going to be a player controller. And this is going to be the BP session controller. And let's do a little bit of setup in here first again. So let's go to the event graph, and let me grab my notes in here quickly as well. So first of all, to make things a little bit easier and we don't need to do everything at once, we're gonna make an event in here, and we're going to use that event to replace our end client session events in both of the controllers, so the shooter and the menu one. But first of all, I want to get all the reparenting done so we don't have to worry about all of that stuff at once. So first of all, we're going to create a custom event in here. And I'm going to call this a new end client session for now. And we want to make sure that we have it set to replicate run on the owning client. And in here, we're going to destroy the client session. So we want to right click and look for the destroy session node. And simply hook it up. So the player controller is a reference to ourselves. And on success, we want to open a level. So let's look for open level by name. And we want to open our main menu level. So the client is back in the main menu. So that's main menu underscore map. Oh, there we go. So we're going to get back to this later. We just wanted to make sure this one is in place. Now we are going to get some stuff from our other controller. So the original menu controller. And we're going to copy that in here. So let's open our menu controller. The first thing we want to get from here is the actual UI show password menu. So the function over here, let's right click, copy it, and go to the new session controller, and we're going to paste it. So right click functions and paste it. So the naming is fine. And now we want to make sure that we create the variable in here. So right click and create variable. And that should be good to go. So go back to the menu controller, and now we also want to get the remove password function. So right click, copy, and go to the session controller, paste it in here. So we don't need to create any variables. That's all good to go. Then for the last thing, we're going to go back to the menu controller again. And in the event graph, we're going to grab the events that we created in the previous episode. So we have the show password menu, remove password menu, the events, not the functions. And then the enter the wrong password, verify password, and private server disconnect. So those events. We're simply going to select all of that stuff and copy it, right, Control C. And then go to the session controller to the event graph. And in here, we're going to paste it. So we're going to get this pop-up. We're simply going to say do nothing and then confirm. So it's going to say these events are not in place, but we actually just pasted them in here as well. So what we can do is simply right click the nodes that have the little red line, and we're going to refresh the node. And over here for the enter the wrong password as well. So refresh nodes, and those are good to go. So all of that should be good, and we don't need to fix anything in here. So we can simply compile and save, and those are set up. So now we want to go back to our session game mode and do some setup in there again. So first we're going to open our session game mode. And in here, because we created our new controller, we can set up our StartGameForController event. So we're going to select it and add the input in here, create a new input, and that's the player controller. And now we can assign the correct type in here. So that's going to be our session controller, like so. So we can compile and save this game mode and get rid of it. And now we can go back to our session player controller. And in here we had that call to our StartGameForController event where we didn't have the input yet. So now we can hook our reference to self back up to the player controller. So that's in the verify password event. Compile and save that one. So that's out of the way. And we also want to go inside of our Menu-GameMode. And in here we also added the StartGameForController calls. So that's in the event handle starting new player. And at the end we have two of them. So we also want to hook up the player controller over here. Okay, so we need to reparent it first, obviously. So we're going to get back to this in a little bit. Sorry, that's my bad. So what we want to do first then is go inside of our password menu, because we're also using some stuff in there, and we're going to get rid of the old references in here. So let's go to the password menu event graph, and then for the button cancel, we actually cast to our menu controller, call the end client session, which I mentioned earlier, and then the remove password. So we're going to select this stuff and delete it. And also for the button accept, cast menu controller verified password, we're going to delete this as well. Compile and save it. Then we can go back to our Menu-GameMode. And in here, let me grab my notes quickly because I'm starting to switch things up. In here, what we want to do, let me double check quickly. So we're going to remove the old calls as well. So we're going to go to our event handle starting new player event. And at the end, so private server disconnect and show password menu. These are the old ones on the menu controller. So we want to get rid of those. Delete them. That's good to go. And I think we don't want to delete anything else in here. Let me double check quickly. No, that should be good to go. And now we can go back to our menu player controller. So we're still having the errors. If we compile this, that's fine. Framework, menu player controller. And inside of the menu controller, we also want to get rid of all of the old stuff. So we can grab our UI show password menu and we can delete it. We should be able to. So let's double check. Let's right click, find references. Oh, so we're actually calling that over here on the event graph. So that's my bad. So first of all, let's grab the event graph, the events that we copy to our session controller. So show password menu remove, enter the wrong password, verify password, and the private server disconnect. All of that stuff, simply delete it from the event graph. So after you did that, we can remove the UI password menu and the show password menu. And we can also get rid of the actual variable. That's the password menu over here. So the widget blueprint password menu from the variable list, also delete that one. So now we have all of the old stuff out of the way. Let's compile and save it. And let's make sure that we have everything saved as well. So now we can reparent this to our new class. So we're going to go to our class settings, parent class, and select the new session controller. So not the game mode, but the controller. And now that we have this one reparented, we can start fixing things up again. So in the menu controller over here, we actually, let me double check. Yeah, there's actually one small thing we need to do in the menu controller. So we have our original end client session event in here. And, well, we don't actually need to do that, by the way. No, we're going to skip this step. That's a little bit confusing. We're not going to do that. So we're done in the menu controller for now, and we're going to go back to our password menu, because in there we got rid of some stuff, and now we want to add the calls to our new session controller in there. So let's go back to the password menu event graph, and for button cancel, we can grab our owning player, and this time we can cast it to our session controller. And on the session controller, we have the same events that we had on the old controller. So over here, we can call our new end client session event. So new end client session. And after that, we can call our UI remove password menu. So drag off here again and call UI remove password menu. And also hook that one up. And then for the button accept, we also want to cast to our session controller. And this time we want to call our verify password over here. So drag off and verify password. And make sure we hook up the string. So that's good to go. So the password menu is back up and running, and now we can go inside of the Menu-GameMode. And over here we have to fix these errors that were still popping up, and we can finally hook up the player controller in the StartGameForController calls. So we are starting inside of the event handle starting new player. Let's do the stuff at the end first. So we have StartGameForController. We can simply hook up our player controller that comes from the cast at the beginning over here, so the cast to menu controller, and do the same thing for the other one at the bottom. And then we want to make sure that we add the correct calls back in here. So over here, if this branch was false, if we're not a friend, then we want to call our private server disconnect. So we want to drag off the player controller again and call the private server disconnect. So this goes into the false bin over here. And if we have the session use password is true, then we want to call our show password menu. So drag off the player controller again and show the password menu. So this time you want to call the function show password menu and not the UI one. So this is the replicated one that the server needs to call. And we're going to plug this into the true pin. So those should be fixed up and good to go. And then let me see. We want to fix up our StartGameForController event over here. So we can't hook up the references over here because this is actually the child class and we need to cast to it. So let's make a little bit of room, and we're going to drag off the player controller and cast to our menu controller. So in this case, we actually need the menu controller to be able to access its specific functionalities. So we're going to cast to it over here. So now we can finally compile it, and we fixed the errors. So that came out really hard. Okay, so that's good to go. Now we can move on to our shooter player controller, and we can actually fix that one as well. So let's open up our shooter player controller. That should be all the way down here. So this is still our old player controller class, and we want to reparent this one to our new class as well. So we're going to do that one first. Let's go to the class settings, and we are going to select our new session controller in here. So that one is good to go. And now we kind of want to fix up our end client session stuff. So we have two end client session events. We had one in our menu controller, and we had one in our shooter player controller. And right now we can simply make sure that we replace all of those calls with the new event that we placed in our session controller. So what we're going to do, we can grab one of these end client session nodes. It doesn't really matter which one you pick as long as you have named them exactly the same. And then you can right click and find references. So we're going to click the little binocular sign over here, and it will show all of the references inside of the project. So first of all, we have the Shooter-GameMode. So this is the actual implementation of the event, so we don't need to worry about this one. In the pause game menu, we want to replace them. So let's double click over here and it will take us to them. And over here, we're calling the shooter player controller. So we want to replace this one. So we can drag off here and simply call the new end client session event that's on our parent. Get rid of the old call and simply hook this one up instead. And there's actually a second call in here a little bit down. So again, that's end client session, and we want to replace it with our new end client session. And hook it up as well. So that's the first reference. Let's get our search result back in here. So we have the player died menu. We want to replace this one as well. So let's double click it and simply add the other call. So new end client session. Move it over, get rid of this one. Compile. And let's see what else we have. So in the lobby menu, So we also want to replace that one. Lobby menu, call the new one, end client session, and get rid of the old one. And then, so inside of the password menu, we already replaced that one. So that's the new end client session. In the session controller, that's the implementation of the new event, so we don't need to worry about that one. Menu controller is the implementation of the old event on the other controller, so that's good to go as well. And the shooter player controller is also the implementation of the event. So if this is true, then I lied about the first one, and this is not the player controller, this is the Shooter-GameMode. So this is not the implementation, this is a call, and we want to replace that one as well. So let's also go to the Shooter-GameMode one, and in here also call our new end client session. And move it over and get rid of the old one. So now we have all of the old references removed. So that's good to go, and we can actually remove the old events from the player controllers. So if we go to the menu player controller and client session, we can simply delete it. And then go to the shooter player controller and do the same thing in here. So we also have the end client session, and let's delete it. So in here we're setting the multiplayer boolean back to false, and we kind of want to make sure that we do that in our new event as well, probably. So let's copy these 3 nodes before we delete it, and then we're going to delete the function, compile it and save it. So let's make sure that we add it inside of our new implementation in the session controller. And that's not up here, so let's open it up. Framework, and then get our session controller. So inside of the event graph, we should have our new end client session event, and in here we can simply add the call to our game instance to reset the boolean. So it doesn't matter if we do this in a solo game as well, that won't break anything, so we can simply add it in here, and that's good to go. So now that we have all of this stuff removed and replaced, we can get rid of the new in this name, so it makes a little bit more sense as well. Okay, so compile and save, and now we should have everything reparented and fixed up. So now it's really simple to actually implement our private and password options inside of our shooter game mode. So that's what we're going to do next, and then we're done for today. So let's open our shooter game mode backup, and in here we need to go to the event graph. So we want to set up our event handle starting new player in here as well. So ignore these 2 nodes, that's not important. So event handle starting new player, let's disconnect it over here. And for the call over there, we want to replace it with our event StartGameForController. So let's do that one first. Oh, that's not a custom event. StartGameForController. So we want to add the event implementation. So let's click this one. And we can simply hook it up, hook up the player controller to the cast, and that's taken care of. So now we want to set up the event handle starting new player, and we want to set it up slightly different as the menu game mode. So that's why we're going to add 2 separate implementations. Otherwise we could have added this to our new session game mode, and that would have worked as well. But in this case, because we're already in game, we need to make sure that we only check players that are actually joining a game in progress. So all of the players that are actually in the lobby and are actually through our checks when we start the game, we don't have to have them enter the password again or do the friends check again. So those players are verified and they can enter the game. And only new players that join the game while it's already running, we want to make sure that we check those for the friends only and password stuff. So in our handle starting new player, what we're going to do, first we're going to cast to our session controller. And then we're going to check the boolean that we have to check if our game is already running or not. So we're going to add a branch in here and check our is game started. So this will simply tell if the game is started or not. So if this is false, we can grab our SessionController and simply call our StartGameForController. So as I mentioned, these players come directly from the lobby and they are verified to be good to enter the game. And if this is actually true, so the game already started, then we want to check if we are doing friends only or password lobbies. So we're going to get a branch in here and we can right click and get our parent variables. So the first one is the friends only bool. We should be able to get them at least. Yeah, there we go. So session friends only. Plug that one in. So if we are running a friends only server, then we want to check if the player that's joining is actually a friend. So let's hook up a second bool over here. We're going to grab all of our connected controllers and we want to get the host controller. So get a copy and get it of index 0. So that's always the host. And from here we can call our isAFriend function to check if the player is a friend or not. So is a friend, and we want to go back to our session controller over here, drag off from the session controller and get the unique net ID. This one, and then we can simply hook that one up to the isAFriend function, and that will return the boolean. So we can plug that one into condition of the second branch. And then if the player is not a friend and we're running friends only, we're going to disconnect the player. So we want to drag off our session controller and we want to call our private server disconnect. So this one is going to be hooked up to the false pin over here if the player is not a friend. Then if this is true, then we want to check if we're maybe running a password server as well. So we're going to grab another branch, hook that one up to the true pin. And also grab the false pin over here and hook that one up. So over here we're going to check if we are running a password. So get use password, the bool. Hook it up over here. And then if this is true, then we want to show the password menu to the player. So we're going to drag the session controller and call our show password menu. So again, the normal event and not the function. So the replicated one. Over here, hook this one up to the true pin, and if this is false, then we can actually just start the game, so we don't have to enter a password or anything. So we can simply hook up our StartGameForController over here, and that should pretty much be everything. So now we have that set up and good to go, and we can actually test this to see if we didn't make any mistakes. So be back in a sec. Okay, so I packaged the game. I have it running on both of my PCs with 2 different Steam accounts, and the other PC is actually running a game already that is that is password protected. So let's look for a game over here, and let's see what happens if we try and join it. So just to make sure the other player is not in the lobby, he's actually in game waiting for players. So we have our password protection menu and we need to enter the password. So that's not correct. Let's see what happens if we type the correct password and we actually join the game. So that part is working. Now we might also want to test the friends only stuff. So I need to remove this weirdo from my friends list and I'll be back. Okay, so back again. And this time I have the session running on the other PC. I'm not friends anymore. No, that's good to go. And it's running a friends only session. So let's look for sessions. And let's try and join it. And we should be kicked out. So private server, friends only, you will be disconnected. And we're back in our main menu. So that seems to be working. Nice. So that's today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider leaving a like and I'll be back soon for more. Talk to you later, guys and girls. Bye bye.